Hello and welcome to Higher Thinking on Higher Ed. I am Sharlyn Carrington of Content Strong Communications, the communications and marketing partner of choice for universities, colleges, and nonprofits. Today, I am excited to continue diving into the trends, the challenges encountered by communications and marketing leaders in higher ed. And I am honored to welcome Heather Henley to the hot seat today. Heather is the director of scientific communications at Augusta University, and she comes to us today having served 10 years in journalism, including roles as entertainment editor and daily content editor at the Savannah Morning News. She joined Augusta U in 2019 as director of brand communications, and since 23 has since served as director of scientific communications for the new Immunology Center of Georgia at AU's Medical College. You sounds like you're doing a lot, Heather. Thanks so much for bringing your expertise to this conversation today. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. I'm enjoying this series. Looking forward to being part of it.
Yes, I am particularly excited to talk to you because, as I have conversations with everyone, I get more and more, again, for quite frankly, as I watch the news, I'm more and more acutely aware of the impact scientific communications is having, like across communities, and particularly when we think about. I don't want to say the aversion, but there is a lot of conversation depending on your communities based on around, what scientific information they're going to accept and how that impacts their behavior and how that impacts their
Of
day-to-day
course.
life. So lovely, really excited to kind of dive into that with you today. The first question I typically ask is just situate me a little bit. Describe your role at Augusta in the Immunology Center, how your work is kind of helping to advance the institution's research and engagement priorities.
Sure. So previously, I spent 4 years as director of brand communications in our central communications and marketing team. So I was able to build a lot of good relationships that have served me well in this new role. So when it came time this center was formed, I thought, what a unique opportunity to be a part of something brand new to help grow the direction and the culture and the branding of this center. I'm so fortunate to work with brilliant and kind and hardworking scientists. Our directors are amazing. They're a married couple, so that's always a fun dynamic. Luckily, they're usually on the same page. But I've been fortunate to be involved in a number of, I think, really important projects that are going to set the tone and
Right.
set a lot of goals for where this center is going to be in the next 5 years. A part of a strategic planning process, which we didn't technically have to do. You know, all of our colleges, our university has a strategic plan. The president didn't come and say that your center has to have this, but I said, I think this is going to benefit us very well. So leading that process took the better part of a year, but we had a lot of great involvement from our team. We have a lot of specific goals that we intend to meet in the coming years. And then, of course, like you said, that public understanding of science. I think that's a big part of what my role is, what I'm trying to do here, to make sure our scientists understand their role in meeting the public and expressing their science in a way that is understandable and relatable, as well as helping form those events, working with some of our more established centers, our institutional review board, the people on campus that are already doing this great work to bring in the community and have those conversations, to kind of form our own relationships, because that trust is just so invaluable. We have to have people, understanding why this research is funded, if they're donating or, their tax dollars are being used for it, how that is benefiting their health.
Right.
And also, whether it's an actual clinical trial or, hey, we need to study the specific cancer that you have. We need to use your tissue. We need to use your blood. Here's
Right.
what we're going to do with it. Here's so that people have that trust and understanding when they are participating in the research themselves, that they're not, that there's trust in a relationship. So I see that as a big part of my job, as well as the person in this communications role.
You said a lot there that's really, really interesting. And I want to specifically follow up on, the trust piece and of course what's happening in our current climate. But there's something you said earlier, which was the strategic planning piece. It's something that you didn't necessarily need to do. Why did you feel that was so important to, coming out of, I think, the broader institution strategic
Mhm.
plan, really put one in place for what it is that you guys are doing?
So I think it was maybe 21 or 22 or so, Augusta University renewed its strategic plan, and I was a big part of that process. And over the next year or two, I saw real progress being made in some of these areas of research growth, community engagement, just student and faculty support. Um, and I said, as a new center, I think it's going to be really important that we
Right.
outline what we need to do to get where we want to go. And my directors were super supportive of that. I certainly would not recommend, if you have an institutional effectiveness team or something of that nature in your university, please bring in all the resources, because I'm not a strategic planner. I don't know, the best ins and outs of doing this the right way, but our
Right.
institutional effectiveness team is incredible. My buddy Brittany, I got to call her out because she really just kept us on track and helped us bring in all the appropriate stakeholders, not just
Right.
our team, but others within the institution, because immunology sits in an interesting place in science. We really
Right.
want to be that hub of research. We work with our Georgia Cancer Center. We work with our Vascular Biology Center. We work very closely with other research centers within our medical college to further the science. And then when it comes to that community engagement, we're working with various departments across campus. So it was really important that we had all of them sort of on board in their role in our center's success and how we're going to partner with them, but also to bring in our people. We had a lot of town halls, we had a lot of surveys, we had a lot of SWOT analysis. There was a lot of opportunities. Nobody could come to me at the end of the process and say, I
Right.
didn't have the chance to say what
Contribute.
I thought. So that really benefited me in the end, because now that we're in the implementation stage, I didn't have to really beg people or pull teeth or have anybody be voluntold to be a part of these 4 teams that we have focused on different areas of our plan. People raised their hand and wanted to be a part of it. So I think engaging those people all along the process really just helps them be a part of it. And I like to say that culture doesn't just happen. You have to build a team culture if that's a priority for you. And I think we really are. Our grad students tell me they feel very connected to our center. Our faculty tell me they feel very, informed about what's happening, because we've grown rapidly. We have almost 80 people in our center, just starting with like 3 people in 2022.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and we still have to hire 10 more faculty members in all of their labs. So we're growing at a rapid pace, and you have to be thoughtful about that. So that's where I thought the strategic plan really was going to be beneficial. And we're already seeing some results as far as growth and community engagement, just retention, people are staying. So I think we're seeing the beginnings of the success of that.
Right. And just ensuring that there's alignment across the board, right? Specifically when you're growing that rapidly, as you rightfully said, everyone needs to understand what the vision is and how it is that you get there. Having that in place helps you do that, I think, in a, concise, but, cohesive way.
Well, and that alignment part is because we made sure we were aligning up with our medical college plan, our Augusta University, and our university system plan. All of those played into how we formed our own.
Right. I mean, touching on the kind of the elephant in the room almost, what are you seeing right now in terms of broader shifts, that are really kind of impacting how research institutions must communicate with the public, with
Mhm.
funders, with internal stakeholders? How are those trends and overall opinions, I'd say, kind of shaping your strategies?
Sure. So as we, navigate what we do and don't know about the federal funding,
Right.
we have to continue forming relationships with other foundations that might fund science, the community that might be a part of that science or potentially fund it. Definitely, philanthropy is a huge part of what we do, but I think we're continuing to invest in that, to look at how we're putting out those communications, who we're communicating with, what opportunities we're creating for people to interact with our scientists.
Right.
One thing that I just put out, and fingers crossed, is a submission for a community grant to pay for some scientific, very specific communications training for our scientists to
Right.
get them to talk to a general audience about what we do here and how it impacts them and their health. Um, and that is bringing in other departments, other researchers. This would give room for about 80 researchers to receive the training, and
Right.
then working with like our community engagement team, our School of Public Health, different partners that made sense for us to put on events, build upon the relationships they already have going, and just
Right.
to give those opportunities for these scientists who have had this training to have one-on-one conversations, to address a room of middle school or high school students,
Right.
to reach out to our faith community here in Augusta and the region. Um, so twofold is getting the training, because unfortunately they don't receive that kind of training in their
Right.
studies. They're learning how to be ethical scientists. They're learning how to build a lab, and do all of that the right way, the real
Yeah.
work. But this is also a big part of the work. We have to Scientists just have to be thinking more about how they're presenting
Tell
their,
the story. Right.
yeah, and how we're reaching people. It can't all be, you have to be thinking about the fun short social media clips and all the different ways
Yeah.
that higher ed communicators are trying to reach various audiences. But how are we making that not just accessible but kind of fun too? How are we
Right.
making it interesting? So one fun Instagram takeover we did of the Augusta University, we don't have our own because it's kind of makes sense not to try to build that audience, but
Right.
we had someone we did some balloons and we made a costume, and we had one of our grad students running around campus, dressed as a virus, just asking questions about the immune system. What do you know and what don't you know?
Right.
So just trying to make it a little more, science. I think a lot of people might see science as very serious and just this vast world that they can't break into and they don't understand. So I think it's just that ongoing forming the relationships, not just showing up once. And our IRB is really good at this of, getting out into the community and showing up consistently, and
Right.
and not talking at them, talking with them, having those conversations, allowing them to ask questions, find out, what do you understand about science, or what are your thoughts? What
Right.
would you like to see addressed in your community? What are some of the issues, the health issues, the awareness issues? Not just showing up and saying we're the smartest people in the room.
Right.
Not that I think my team does that, but that training could be really invaluable in helping them approach those conversations thoughtfully.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said about making the science, which can be, so technical, right? Just so
Yeah.
like higher level academic, making it more accessible so people really do understand the impact of what it is that's being done day to day.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great point. What's working? What's not working for you? I mean, you definitely touch on some, I think, overall broader challenges, and even I mentioned that one right there, just this idea of inaccessibility. From
Mhm.
your current position in a relatively new research center, considering all the kind of things that are happening around the kind of the broader climate nationally and so on, what communication, what engagement, what strategic planning efforts are really giving you some good traction, and where are you still kind of encountering those roadblocks?
So I think the partnerships, the efforts at community engagement are starting. We're starting to make progress. We've done some events with a local lupus foundation where we've been able to reach patients. We've been able to have conversations around an upcoming clinical trial, which patients get very excited about. There's not a lot of lupus research happening.
Right.
Um, some of the social media has gotten great engagement. We made our own LinkedIn and lots of people are following it, so it's seeing some of those successes. Some of the challenges are less so on the communication side, more so on that clinical trial side. We need to, well, there are communications aspects of it, helping our researchers have opportunities to talk with clinicians. We have an affiliated health system right across the street. So how are we facilitating opportunities for them to meet and talk about their issues and how we can better work together, how we can better facilitate getting patient samples, things like that. Because really the whole goal is that translational research. That's where we get the economic benefits. That's where the NIH can say $2.50 in every dollar, and you get a
Right.
$2.50 return on every dollar invested. That's where we're making the real device and medication and just treatment advances. It does benefit industry. It can become a company or be a part of a company, but it's facilitating those opportunities to further that translational research, which does certainly have a communications component.
Right.
I think that's one of the bigger challenges, is almost because clinicians are so busy. I mean, not that everybody isn't, but it's finding the time and the ongoing opportunities and bringing yourself to them, coming over with coffee, saying, coffee chat with the researchers at usually, 7 a.m.
Right.
But I think creating all of those opportunities for clinical and community engagement, that's one of my huge focuses right now.
I really like even the example that you use there. Literally, almost I'm going to call it old school kind of traditional method of making those connections and building those relationships. Is that I'm walking across the street with a coffee because I'm trying to get in your face and have a conversation. And it's so interesting because I think as we have these conversations more and more every day, we see, at least I'm starting to see, a desire to return to some of those traditional methods because we are so AI technology focused right now, that there
Mhm.
is this disconnect, and there really is value in creating those human one-on-one, relationships and opportunities to build relationships, which clearly is a big key factor, for you guys in particular. And I think you just
For
mentioned,
scientists in particular, because they are, by and large, research, polls show people trust scientists. They really do think they are experts at what they're talking about. They think they're trustworthy. They think they can't communicate, which can be
right,
true. They
right,
also kind of see them as a little cold, scientific. It's almost a bedside manner thing, like you might treat a physician or train a physician. Is how do you, have that networking, and how do you make it work for you?
right. I think you said it again, there is this idea of trust. Do you think that's an ongoing challenge for not just for scientists, but for, your entire institution, really, that idea of, as a communicator, trying to continue to reinforce and build the trust around everything that the institution and the center is doing?
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't have to go into all the history of the reasons a lot of people don't trust
Right,
clinical science, but we do have to address that. We have a large African American community in
right,
the Augusta area, so it is something that you have to. That is another sort of elephant in the room, but we have to be aware of it, and that's again where I said coming in not from a place of expertise, but from a place of curiosity.
right.
And I think that kind of thing helps build trust, as well as that just consistently showing up, coming to where they are, coming to the rural communities, the churches, the health fairs. They're not showing up in our labs to come talk to us. It,
Right.
it's great to create those opportunities as well, especially for young students, but that's not where you're going to reach the majority of your community.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really big point. If I think about some of the things you just touched on, and I think about, the next 6 to 12 months, some of the shifts I think we're projected to see, what are your top priorities over the next few months, whether that's related to, I don't know, community trust building, as we talked about, or strategic planning, as we talked about before, or really aligning, with other research entities within the university? What are your top goals?
Fundraising is one. We want to continue building those opportunities to interact with fundraisers or potential donors.
Right.
We have a huge pace line. I'll give a shout out to our pace line bike ride run that's coming up in October. It's raised almost $2 million for Georgia Cancer Center research, which we are a big part of. We do a lot of cancer research, so some of our faculty are a part of the Cancer Center as well. But that's $2 million in grants that have funded over 30 projects.
Yeah.
So that I'm trying to drum up our team. I'm trying to drum up those donations. So just events like that, being present, being a part of our campus community, our larger community. Um, hopefully getting this grant funded. We would have a site visit in the next couple months if we get to that
Right.
stage, and then trying to impress and tell our story to secure that. I really think that could be, we partnered with 8 different other groups around campus to try to get either training or to work on those, to plan community events next year to reach a wide variety of our community, students, retirement communities, faith communities. So those are some of these events and some of these projects, those are probably my biggest priorities. And I also want to care for our team. A lot of them are completely new to Augusta. Some of them are new to the country. So you want to make sure that their, internal communications are a big priority of ours as well. We want to retain people. We want to make sure they feel like they're a part of what we're trying to do here. They're a part of the success. They're valued, they're heard. So all of those, I would say, are what I'm focusing on.
I think that's a great focus, lofty agenda, but definitely, definitely great. If I think about, all the things you mentioned that you're doing right now, how are you measuring all of that? What metrics or outcomes
Mhm.
are you currently tracking to really determine the success of what it is that you're doing?
Well, and that was the great, another part of the strategic plan. I knew we would really look at what we needed to measure and how we
Right.
were going to measure it. So as this implementation team goes on, I've still got to get all my dashboards together. I think we're using Power BI, but we'll be able to have those Excel files looking at. So we have 4, main goals of our plan. So one part is, just the publication, the research, the growth
Right.
there. So how tracking a lot of things about our publications. On the communication side, it's tracking some obvious things like website visits, social media engagement, but also the number of, who can we count as a community partner this year? Have we grown that number? How many events did we have? How many people attended them? How many people did we interact with? Particularly, again, if I get this grant, there are measurements built into that, before and after surveys for the scientists. How comfortable are you before training, communicating with an audience? And how comfortable are you afterward? As well as, when we have these events, surveying that audience before and after. Did they feel that they learned something from the experience? Did they feel like the scientists communicated well? So all of that would, be measured. I would say with or without the grant, we'll be trying to measure our audiences, and their metrics and who they are and who we're reaching. So yeah, again, that plan has been really important to helping us figure out how we're going to measure our impact.
Right. I think in an earlier conversation, you and I talked a little bit about collaboration, and certainly you talked about it here just a little bit as well. Given your interest in building, I don't know, a coalition, a community of practice amongst science communicators in higher ed, something like that, what would an ideal collaboration or network look like for you?
As far as science communicators,
Yeah,
or
as far as science communicators, as far, and they don't necessarily have to be communicators by trade. They could just be
yeah.
scientists. But this idea of sharing,
Mhm.
communications and the way you get the messages out amongst a community or a group, what would that look like for you?
That would be great. I mean, we do. So when I was in my former role, we had a communications council made up of everyone who was in
Okay.
sort of my type of role, throughout, at each college and each academic unit that might have, a communicator. So we still have those meetings. We have a chat on Teams. So I think, as a campus, we're doing a pretty good job of, working together, on communications in general.
Right.
I think our campus is growing, our research arm of things. They're hiring some new leadership and different positions. So I'm really excited to see how that grows, because not, every college doesn't have the level of communications, or
Right.
I'm sorry, research that, my center, that the medical college has. So how are we bringing together the various people in my type of role, as well as people like our IRB, like our, just the various, grant support offices? How are we bringing those teams together who may not have a communications person? How are we best working with them? And I think, it would be something like a research communications council, where we meet regularly, where we share ideas, where we brainstorm, where we tackle those wicked problems that we're
Right.
facing.
Right. I think that's a great, a really, really useful idea. Just this idea of sharing best practice and information across the board to kind of move the needle on some of the bigger challenges. I think certainly as a sector, everyone's facing, but particularly in this niche, just this idea of communicating the impact and the importance and the vitality of research, right?
Yes.
Um, my last question is always about, kind of the big challenge, the big barrier. Some people find it really easy to answer, and some people find it a little bit more difficult. If I could give you a magic wand right now and you could eliminate one major obstacle that's slowing down your team or your work, what would it be? And what would that mean for your work and your ecosystem as a whole?
I do think I wish that the scientific communications training was a part of, every grad student's training.
Right.
Obviously, the lab part, the actual scientific work is the most important thing. But if they're getting out with their PhD and they don't know how to talk to anyone who's not a scientist about the
Right.
impact and the value of their work, they're not going to get those donations. They're not going to get those collaborations,
Yeah.
and just that community support in general. My bosses in particular, and they're very experienced. They are so good at talking to people
Right.
about what we're trying to do here. But that's because they've been doing this for a very long time at a very high level. I wish every grad student and postdoc would come out of their training with having taken at least one, semester, one class dedicated to here's how you talk about what you do.
Yeah. I think that's such a huge and critical point is really the idea once again of making sure that universities and institutions can create almost more holistic experience for their students. So no matter what, a student goes on to be, and the way they're able to apply the knowledge that they've gained throughout their university experience, they are able to do that, which I think is so important. It seems like a soft skill, but I think even across the board, even beyond science and research,
Yes,
everyone needs to understand or be able to talk about what it is that they learned and how they're going to apply it in a real world setting and in society and how it's going to benefit other people.
of course.
Um, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you were dying to tell me or share with us today that I neglected to ask you about?
Just emphasizing the importance of collaborations. I
Right.
know, people have talked about silos a lot in these programs, and we all see that, but it benefits no one. Your campus should have resources you may not even be aware of in other departments and
Right.
people that and I think by and large here at Augusta University in particular, this is the only higher ed institution I have worked at. People are so ready to jump in. You tell them your vision, how it's going to benefit the community, the campus, and they are ready to partner and help in any way. And I can say that's extremely true at Augusta University, and I'm very proud of that. But I just encourage everyone who may be listening to look at your collaborations.
Such a good point. I feel like that's the theme of this conversation today, Heather. That's a good one. Thank you. Thank you so much again for your time, for your experience, for your perspective. I mean, it's been such a really thoughtful and generous conversation, certainly timely considering some of the things we've gone through, I think, as a
Mhm.
world, more than a nation, a world in the past few years. To our listeners, to our watchers, I hope the episode sparked ideas, affirmed your own experiences, or I don't know, helped you see a challenge in a new light. If you're a communications or marketing leader in higher ed, or a leader in advancement or enrollment, whatever, and you want to contribute to this conversation, please do. I'd love to hear from you. The truth is, these conversations are not just talk, they really are a start of a shared roadmap for the future of our field. So let's get to work. Thank you so much again, Heather.
Thank you.